Hello. Um, I'm still sick, so I'm not sure how long this will last, but I made it to work today, so I figured I should at least make a video. And that sort of describes a derangement on my part, I think. So I've been thinking a lot about nostalgia. Nostalgia is an interesting facet to our lives. We want to remember the good times. We want to embrace the good times and forget the bad. We want to remember the things we liked and forget the things we hate. There's something in human nature to sort of make everything a little bit rosier. We all do it. We all think of our childhood as somehow better, or at least more dramatic. Some people will tell you their childhood was deeply terrible, and some people can even actually back that up with actually having a terrible childhood, but not as many people as actually claim it. Just like not everybody's childhood was as wonderful as they like to think about. They forget the rough edges, the hard parts, because they don't want to remember them. I occasionally do this, thinking about some of my harder times in my life with a certain rosy glow. There was a time in my life when I was pretty much homeless. And yet there are things about that time that I remember fondly. I have nostalgia for living in Chattanooga, which at the time I lived there, I was not doing well. So I miss that. I miss something there. I miss the people that I knew, the places that I knew, the camaraderie. Anyways, I try and gloss over the terrible parts. And the parts that I can't gloss over, I try not to dwell on. What brought this up? Okay, fair point. So, a couple of things. First, there is a Kickstarter going on right now called Designers and Dragons. Or is it Dungeons and Designers? I get them backwards because I'm a doofus. But let me pull it up just to be sure. And activity, because Anyways, it's a book about the history of gaming. Yeah, there it is. Designers and Dragons. Okay, I was right. Sorry. I had to pull it up. It's a book about the history of gaming. And it's a Kickstarter right now, and they're at $70,000. So, apparently, a lot of people had interest in this. And it's a series of books, ranging from the 1970s to the 2000s to 2010 range. And this started me thinking about the nostalgia we feel for the times before. It is safe to argue, it is safe to say that the vast majority of the edition wars boils down to nostalgia. There are some people who feel a nostalgia for the game that they fell in love with in the first place. They may ignore some of the complaints they had about the game before because they had so much fun back then. And they want to recapture that. 5th edition calls back to older editions because people do feel that nostalgia. And there's nothing wrong with that. Designers and Dragons attempts to talk about the history of behind the scenes, how these games were created, who was involved, what challenges did they have to overcome, the infighting that happened in the industry. Occasionally, if you're watching, you'll hear about the infighting that happens in the industry now, the people who don't like this person because of this stance or that thing or some other thing. This is nothing new. It's happened before. It'll happen again. And, if you're nostalgic for the history of gaming, if you want to know more about the history of gaming, and I've backed the Kickstarter because I want to know more, and I know a fair amount, but I'm not a scholar of the history involved. And so far, what I've seen of the book so far, they've done a bang-up job. So I definitely encourage people to go check it out. I urge you to go ahead and back that, because if you have an interest in making sure that history is available, this is a good way to do that. The other thing that got me thinking about nostalgia is, so there's a guy I know. His name's PG Holyfield. And PG is, so I got into podcasting in late 2005, early 2006, something like that. I started out doing a Dawning Star in-world radio news program, sort of here's a bunch of adventure threads in the form of Radio Free EOS. And it was, if you haven't played Dawning Star or heard of it, it's an amazing sci-fi setting that was originally released for D20 Future and recently got a reboot to Fate. And I have some friends who worked on it, and I was a fan, so I did this podcast. I was encouraged to do this because I had been listening to podcasts from Leo Laporte and some of those people, and I thought, there's something here that you can do that's different sort of storytelling. Flash forward a few years, things changed. I got involved with some online radio theater stuff, pendant productions and so on. And I went to Dragon Con, and while I was there, I went to the podcasting track. It was the first time I'd ever been to a podcasting track, and podcasting was just beginning to hit its stride. And there was a lot of really creative people entering the field. People who were not just doing news podcasts or podcasts about their favorite, TV show or what have you. Those people were there. But there were also a lot of people doing podcasting fiction, which was this notion of releasing a chapter at a time or maybe short stories in episodic format in the syndicated audio form. And there were a bunch of cool people back then, T. Morris, J.C. Hutchins, and one of the people I met, one of the nicest people I met, was a guy named P.G. Holyfield. And P.G. actually gave me a disc, which I've got somewhere, and I can't find it right now, that had like the first few episodes on the disc. And he was like, here, check this out, this is cool. And I was like, alright, sure, yeah, that sounds great. And I checked it out, and it was awesome. It's Murder at Abaddon Hill. And Murder at Abaddon Hill was sort of cross your standard sort of Neverwinter Nights style fantasy with Cadfile. You have these two guys who show up at a, remote outpost, and they have to solve a murder, and then there are werewolves and other things going on that are deeply supernatural. But it has that sort of feel of the Cat File Mysteries, or maybe The Name of the Rose, where there's a mystery to be solved in the context of this sort of fantasy world in an isolated setting. And it was good. It was really good. And a lot of people loved it. And people who got to know P.G. Holyfield really began to love him. He was kind of amazing back then. He was doing far more than he should have. Full voice production on an audiobook. Like, every character gets a separate voice, and it's hard work. And he was doing it pretty much all on his own, except for, the people who contributed voices to him. He was learning as he went along. And he made a name for himself for being one of the nicest guys around. He's sort of a deep, calm voice as well that sort of contributed to that. Well, the past couple of days I found out that PG is suffering from terminal cancer. Cancer is, at this point, pretty much untreatable. All they can do is, strengthen the rest of his body and either wait for the end, I guess. Or, if one were apt to believe in miracles, wait for one of those. He's not going to do well. And this makes me sad. And it made me nostalgic for the early days of my involvement in podcasting. It made me nostalgic for the days that I met him. He was also the first guy to ever, outside of a college literary journal, to ever publish something I wrote. He asked for people to contribute to his anthology, and I had a pitch for a story, and I wrote the story. It was a short story. It was set in world, and I submitted it, and he liked it. He helped me clean it up and turn it into something a little more manageable. Was never even tried to get published before. And then, he included it with the anthology of stories that he was reading that people had submitted. And it felt really good. He made me feel good about myself. Made me feel like I had potential. So, I'm going to include a link to a GoFundMe for his family to help pay for his healthcare expenses, because those are expensive. They're super expensive. And I thought I'd share. I don't know. Today's been kind of a crappy day, and I was thinking about happier times. So, here's the happier times. Alright. Now, I'm not going to do any more of that. I will be trying to produce some more stuff this week. I am a little sick, so my voice is a little out of it, and it hurts to talk for too long. But, yeah. Anyway, but I'm back. I will be going to the LARP at the end of the week, so there'll be a few days of not much from me, but feel free to subscribe, like, share with all the people, and have a good night, and tell the people around you that they're important. Sometimes we forget to. Sometimes we forget to tell people the effect they have on us. So, good night.